For most teachers, preparing lesson plans is an incredibly time-consuming task. In fact, one elementary school teacher that we spoke with told us she spends about 45 minutes on each of 4 lesson plans that she prepares every single day. Now, obviously, teachers have, since time immemorial, found ways to share that workload, but in a new column in Education Next, Bill Tucker talks about some new and more high-tech ways that teachers are finding to be able to share their knowledge. Bill, maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I think the analogy I like to use is a lesson plan is like a good recipe. It doesn't teach the class or solve things, but one of the things that we're looking at are how are the little ways that we can help teachers improve their practice and takes a little bit of the burden off of them. And so if you think about when you're going to cook, having a great recipe really helps move you along a little bit. So increasingly, there are all sorts of sites where you can go and download lesson plans. I'm sure there's not a teacher alive who hasn't Googled a particular subject looking for those plans. There's even a site called Teachers Pay Teachers, where teachers can sell their lesson plans, sell their materials, sell their classroom libraries of Huck Finn or whatever they might do. There was even a place where they could put up an auction and say, I want to find a great fourth grade Texas history set of lesson plans. Who can fulfill this? And they would work out a barter for it. So there's all these interesting things out there.
And in this column in Education Next, you make the point that it's not just about the lesson plan, that it's really that those are more successful because they're helping teachers build community.
Well, sure. I mean, if you think about it with students, we've got all sorts of resources for students to go out, but that doesn't mean we don't need guidance, some way to understand what's good, what's bad, what's going to be useful. And particularly with teaching, it's not just about a generic lesson plan. It's, does this work with my kids in the context that I'm looking for, with my particular style? I mean, there's all sorts of individualization. So the interesting thing, and I think probably the most successful sites that we're beginning to see are really thinking about this not as some online thing, but as a way to take online tools to share things which a lot of times were locked into district file folders, 3-ring binders, or even if they're digitized, sort of hard to access and change, but to share things among existing networks. So you know, the analogy Mark Zuckerberg, who created Facebook, really said, this isn't about some new thing. This is about using online tools to leverage existing relationships. And so we're seeing some of these sites that are really thinking about, well, what are the existing relationships that occur among teachers in a school, across a district, even among teachers in sort of similar subject areas. I might be the only 6th grade science teacher at my school. How can I collaborate with 6th grade science teachers across the country? So really, the ones that I think have the most promise are sort of taking these networks and sharing lesson plans among these networks where there's already trust, there's already some sense of the context, and the lesson plans are more easily shared and more adaptable. And what's really interesting is one teacher I talked to said she really likes it because, you know, she's putting some effort into sharing it. And we see this all throughout the internet where people put crazy amounts of effort into sharing things. And it's really interesting and remarkable. But she says, you know, I actually get feedback on it too. So it's a way to improve my practice also.
Okay. So how do you see over the long haul this changing teaching practice?
So I think the best way to think about it is there are all sorts of small things that we can probably do to again, help lighten the load. Teaching is extraordinarily difficult, and we ask so much of teachers. And so people talk about all these big solutions, but there are all sorts of small solutions too. And I think this is one of those small solutions that, as I talk to the schools that are using it, they say, look, this, you know, having a better lesson plan won't solve it on its own. But if we put this in the context of, let's say, an instructional coach, a really good support program, where the coach can be talking with the teacher and then say, remember that lesson we talked about? Actually, here's a resource for you, and here's actually a video of a teacher teaching that, so you can really see what we're doing. So again, I think it fits in that context. I think the recipe analogy is great. Look, I could download Mastering the Art of French Cooking, but in no way would I be Julia Child. But it would help me improve, and it would help me make a good meal. And so I think for novices, it can really help take some of that load off and help them focus on other areas of their practice. And even the best chefs, I mean, they're always exchanging recipes and trying new things and learning from one another. So I think it's, you know, it has remarkable, interesting ideas for the practice of teaching.
Bill, this sounds so interesting. Where can people who want to read the entire column find a copy?
It's going to be in the next issue, the summer issue of Education Next magazine, and the column itself is actually online on their website now at educationnext.org.